Welcome to the concluding part of our episodes on gifts, skills, talents, and abilities. In the last episode, I shared the examples, teaching from the life of Joseph. And today, I'll be concluding on that subject matter by taking a look at the life of David. So, David, like Joseph too, was at the time the story happened was the youngest. I think was the eighth son of Jesse. Jesse happens to be, I think, the grandson of Boaz, in the Jewish Israeli life back then. And so, being the youngest son, he was actually sent to tend the sheep and the flock, while his brothers to also tend the sheep and flocks. But because of the nature of the existence, the political nature in the region as at that time, there was a lot of wars and fighting between and among nations, and so Israel was in constant war with its neighbors. As a result, all the able-bodied young men were drafted into compulsory military service, which is still a present situation in Israel of today. And so once you have attained a certain age, I don't know the exact age, you are conscripted into the army for compulsory military service. And I think at this time, David may not have totally been eligible enough to be in the military service. So he was confined to taking care of his father's flocks. However, David from a childhood had noticeable some gifts and talents and some skills. One of the talents that was recorded that David had was the ability to play musical instruments. And we found this out that in the life of the Israeli, there was a king, the first king called Saul. And the Bible records that Saul was tormented by an evil spirit from the Lord that made him go into fits of rage and of anger. Some can say modern parlance that he was schizophrenic, or he had paranoia, was paranoid, or he had mental issues, or compulsive disorders, whatever you can you can call it. But this man had definitely had mental issues that made him just misbehave. And so, because his anger was uncontrollable during this period of the so-called attack, one of Saul's servants suggested that Saul should look for someone who can play musical instrument very well, and that whenever that person plays the instrument, that could cause a relief, or that might relieve Saul. And Saul, agreed, and then asked the servant to look for someone. And someone suggested, "Look, I know a young man at the Bible named David. He's the son of Jesse, and the Bible describes David just like Joseph was as a very young, um, handsome. It says ruddy young man who was a giant and was feared to look upon. So both Joseph and David were good looking. They were young, and they had a talent of, in this case, David, of playing instrument. So Saul sent for David, and then David was sent to work in the service of Saul. Remember, it was because somebody recognized the talent or the abilities God has given David while he was still a young boy, probably a teenager or sub-teen. Okay, that was why it was recommended. It was his gift. I believe maybe David must have been playing his instrument, his musical instrument, somewhere in the neighborhood, or in the front of his father's house, or maybe just in the street corner somewhere, and people will gather. Maybe they would throw him a token and all that. But he was playing it, and people noticed that he had a special talent to play instrument. Nobody told us where he learnt it. No, there's not. I'm not aware of any record that says that David went to a school of music or something. So this was a natural, God-given talent that he was able to display, and because it came from God, it had great manifestation, even divine manifestation. That when he played it, even to an evil spirit that was said to come from the Lord, that evil spirit went away. But when David was going to be sent to work with Saul, the Bible records that Jesse, David's father, sent David to Saul with gifts. Imagine, Saul was the one requiring the services of Joseph, of David, but it was David and his father that went with gifts. And if you're going to give gifts to a king, you just don't give any ordinary gift. So suggest that Jesse's father was not really poor, which another principle I will explain later on. But David never sought any compensation from Saul. He was just called because his talent was the one who brought him recognition, and he was called and he served Saul. And it was also recorded that Saul, after a while, got fond of David because of the way he played and he helped his infirmities, his challenges. Then Saul had to tell David, I had to tell Joseph that, look, your son will stay with me, because I believe what was happening was that whenever the trouble comes upon Saul, David will be called upon, and David will go there and play the instrument. And after a while, after everything has subsided, David would come back home to his father and come and tend his father's flocks, and that was the arrangement. It was going back and forth. That's what I believe. But after a while, when Saul saw that David was a very pleasing, a very honest, and a great instrumentalist, and he liked him, he said, you know what, I am fond of your son. Saul told Jesse, David's father, I'm fond of your son, and so I would like to keep your son with me. And so he decided to have David in his custody. Now, fast forward, because of the political nature of the region, as at the time I said, the Israelis were in constant war with all of their neighbors, including Philistine, which was the Philistines, which was one of their major rivals. And so David's brother, or the 7 other brothers, having been of military age, were conscripted into the army. But during the life of Saul went out of favor with God because of some of the things and his disobedience. And so God decided to anoint somebody else as king that would take over after Saul. And in doing so, the lot of the place where the next king of Israel will come from came to the house of Jesse, that is David's family. And so the prominent leader then, their chief priest, spiritual leader then, Samuel, came to Jesse's house to anoint the next king of Israel. On this day, Jesse, David's father, called his 7 older sons who were old enough, who were military men, who were in the service, so that thinking that one of them would be the one to be anointed as king. Unfortunately, none of them were chosen. And Samuel asked Jesse, I know this is the house God told me to come, and all of the 7 sons, none of them has been chosen by God. Do you have yet another one? Then Jesse said, yes, I have one. He's the youngest. I didn't even think he was going to be qualified. Imagine, the president, his father didn't even think that he was good enough. In the case of Joseph, his father was very fond of him. But in this one, his father didn't even consider him that he was good enough. So he didn't call him initially. And Samuel said, look, hurry up, go and call your boy. Let your boy come, because we will not leave here. Nobody will sit down or move until that boy comes. And David came, and the Lord fell on David, and David was chosen, was anointed as next king. David was anointed as next king while he was still tendering his father's flocks, and while he was going to minister to Saul. And Saul got to like him. Saul knew him already. So, as I was saying, there was this period of battle. The Israelis went to war with the Philistines, and a scenario came up that the Philistines said, look, instead of all of us fighting and killing each other, why don't each party send a representative, their best fighter? Let these best fighters fight among themselves. Whoever wins will be lord over the one who loses. So if the Israelis win, the Philistines will serve the Israelis, and if the Philistines win, the Israelis will serve the Philistines. So that, I mean, they will just not kill every other man, and they'll settle the matter. And the Philistines brought their very powerful champion, a man called Goliath. Some account said he stood 9 feet, 10 feet tall. Some said he had 6 hands, but he was a very tough, was a very tall, powerful, fearful looking warrior. He was called the champion of the Philistines. The sight of Goliath alone terrified all of the Israeli army, that nobody could even dare to volunteer, because they knew that if they fought Goliath and they lose, themselves, their fathers, their mothers, their sons, their daughters, all of them will be in slavery. And slavery back then was brutal. Oh, don't make nice words about it. Don't mind words about it. Slavery back then was brutal, and they will avenge all kinds of grievances on you. You know, so because of this, for 40 days, no Israeli could stand up to go and confront Goliath. And this went on like that, you know, for 40 days, until Jesse sent David to the camp to give food to his brothers who were already in the army, 7 other brothers who were in the army. And so when David, David went there, and when David got there, that I met the scenario that was going on. In fact, Eliab, Joseph's older brother, said, "Look, why you've come to the war front? We know you came here because of your arrogance, because of your pride. You want to show that you are a strong man, to you took a fight." That shows us that David himself was not of military age, because already would have been conscripted. You know, so, but David was not going to have that from his older brother. I was like, "Oh, leave me alone. Why? I just came here to deliver, and I came here to catch some fun. What's wrong with that?" And then he overheard Goliath and the Philistine making the same call again, taunting the Israelis. "Well, you lazy people, come now, fight. You say you're God. Come and send some more soldiers." And because of what he heard, a holy anger rose on the inside of David. And they said, what's going on here? And they narrated the story and everything to David. And David said, "You know what? I'm going to go and defeat this giant. Since nobody wants to do it, I'm going to remove the reproach from Israel that is being put upon the armies of the Lord by this uncircumcised Philistine." And so they took David before the king Saul, and they told Saul what David's mission was. I mean, Saul was initially hesitant. I was like, okay. But remember, Saul knew who David was, because David had always served Saul. So Saul knew who David was, and he knew his excellent ability at playing musical instruments. So even if he had a little bit of doubt, he had the before knowledge of him. But when David told him of his own experience back in the wilderness, that, "Look, Saul, don't be afraid. I have killed a lion. I have killed a bear. When they came to attack my father's flock and the sheep, I will go after them, and I will rescue the sheep from their mouth, the mouth of the lion and the mouth of the bear." I mean, that took Saul by surprise. Well, I only know you as a musical instrument player. I didn't know that you also can fight. You kill a bear, you kill a lion. And let's look at it in modern day parlance. If you see a lion coming towards you, or see a bear coming charging towards you, will you wait? Will you even go? Will you wait not to talk of going to rescue? So it takes a level of practice and a level of confidence and a level of skill to be able to kill a lion and to kill a bear. It takes a skill set. And so when David told his experience with to Saul, Saul found that, well, this is a little bit credible. This makes sense. Let's give it a try. Saul even gave David his armor. But because David was not used to that kind of armor, which is another principle I will explain later, that sometimes you just have to go to with what is used for you. Don't add additional baggage. He took off the armor and said, "I'm not used to this." And David decided to use what he was familiar with. And what he was familiar with was sling and stones. Sling and stones. It was the same sling and stones that David used to kill the lion, to rescue the lion, and the bear, to kill the lion and the bear and rescue his father's sheep from their mouth. So David approached Goliath with the stone and sling, and Goliath was very, 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 very insulted. He was very infuriated and felt insulted that, am I a dog that you come with me with sling and stone? What do you think of me? I'm a warrior. I'm a champion. I've been fighting all my life. You're just a kid, and you want to fight me now? First, they insulted me by bringing a young child to me, and then now you came with me with stone. What you call in my local parlance, catapult. Huh? What do you take me for? And David said, well, you came to me by your own strength, by your power, but I come against you in the name of the Lord, the Lord of the armies of Israel, and therefore I will defeat you. History recounts that some person said he picked up 3 stones, some said it was just one, some said it was 6, but that he put the stone to and decided to what? Swing, and when he swung it, he hit Goliath in the forehead, and Goliath fell down. And immediately Goliath fell down, David went towards him, took Goliath's sword, and cut off Goliath's head. And as such, he brought great victory to the Israelis. And everybody was jubilating and rejoicing. Now, the point to notice here is that David did not just kill Goliath overnight. He didn't just attack Goliath and kill Goliath overnight. How was he able to aim that he aimed Goliath for head? Because back then, they usually wear armor. They wear a headgear, a head armor that protects their head. And if you know the armor is made of solid steel, that sometimes even if a knife or a sword comes upon it, it will not penetrate. So how was he able to aim that he hit the forehead or whatever part of the body or of the head that he hit, that it caused him to collapse? And he had a big shield, and he was well taller. The point to notice here is that David spent years practicing how to swing. How to swing. He must have spent years, throwing, hitting and missing, until he got perfect, or he got, if not perfect, almost perfect. That was why he was able to swing and hit the bear, was able to swing and hit the lion. It takes years of practice. It's not just overnight. So because David had developed his skill set in addition to his talent, he had developed the skill set of what? Swinging. Which he did in the wilderness. When he came to the point, a decisive moment in his life, a defining moment in his life, he was able to use that skill and what? And kill Goliath. And he had a victory.